Hello, everybody. How lovely to see you. Well, isn't this exciting? The sun's shining, the sky is blue. I've got 16 of you there. Hello. Hello, Rob and Deb. Oh, Rob and Jeff as well. Jeff's there too. Ah, excellent. Too many oysters. Too many oysters is never enough. Michael, hello. Yeah, they're yummy, aren't they? Fantastic. That's what I said, Paul and Roz. You can never have too many oysters. It's impossible. Hello, Sharpie and Rod. How are you? Jeremy, who I don't think is going to make it on the chat, might tell us otherwise because he managed to really have a go at poisoning himself with an overdose of oysters one time. But he survived, so, and he still enjoys it. Hello, John and Cotty. I was hoping that you guys were connected up to the power. Did you lose power after the storm? It's been a really interesting week. Everyone, hello Kay, hello Emily and Kevin, how you doing? Fish and chips, good Kay. That sounds delicious. What a weird week, after we had all of our technical difficulties last week here, the weather just got worse and worse all night, and those of us who live down here on the peninsula will know that lots and lots of trees came down. Daryl and Sue, lots of oysters. Excellent. Hello, Peter and Karen. Hello, Matt and Renee. Lovely to see you guys. Only out for 8 hours. That you're doing even better than us there. Chablis time, Craig. Absolutely. So we've got 2 wines. We should probably get started getting them in a glass because I did tell you if you could hold off on your food eating just for the first little bit of this tasting. So we should probably get tasting the wine so that then you can get stuck into your food and we can kind of have a bit more of a chilled chat later on. Hello, Alison. Oh, Peter and Karen, lots of fences fell down in Mount Eliza and big trees, and it's quite amazing. I don't know. I'm presuming you guys are still away. So, yeah, it's pretty horrendous. Oh, Emily, I'm sorry about your lemon tree. That's awful. I just planted a yuzu tree in my garden because I'm a tosser, and it was really struggling, but it managed to stay in, so I'm hoping that it hasn't traumatised it too much. Hello, Anne. Chicken sandwiches and prawns. Excellent. Angela, here trying not to eat. Good work. Okay, let's get some wine in the glass so that then you can think about eating. So I have my water. I have chosen tonight to use my Sangiovese glasses. I've got some Burgundy glasses off to the side in case the wine's not showing enough in these glasses. But I think with these 2 young, tight Chardonnays, these are probably the better glasses. 2 big glasses, 2 smaller glasses. If then, Angela, you guys are, one of you have the 2 big glasses and one of you have the 2 smaller glasses, then you're comparing and contrasting the 2 wines with the same matrix, if that makes sense. Oh, Sharpie and Rod, large trees down everywhere, so frightening. So what I failed to do was get these wines out of the fridge early, so they're a little bit too cold, but that's all right. I'll be able to warm them up with my hot little hands. This is the Moorooduc Estate 2019 Chardonnay in a half bottle, and I'm going to put that in my left-hand glass. So that one's an easy one to open. Nice screw cap. Put some of that in my glass. Now what I'm going to do, I've got that in my glass. I'm going to put the reason I suggested with my email, and I'm really sorry that the email was a bit late out this week. Everything kind of telescoped. It was a very strange week. Anyway, hopefully I gave you enough time to get some oysters in or cheese. And yeah, anyway, we'll talk about that later. I'm going to put the rest of this half bottle into this decanter. Oh, crumbs. Bit slower so that it goes in the decanter and not all over the computer. And then I'm going to pop that over there for I've got friends, got Richard and Jill on the other table waiting for their fair share. So some of that Chardonnay in there, and then I'm going to open the Chablis and put it into the right-hand glass. Not a screw cap. How annoying. Did everyone have to go running looking for their corkscrew to get this one open? I hope you're able to find one. Otherwise, if you Google ways of getting corks out of bottles when you don't have a corkscrew, it's quite entertaining. There's apparently a thing you can do with a shoe and a wall. I'm not quite sure how that works. Hello, Zach and Jack. How are you going? There we go. So 750 mils of Chablis. Now, as I said to you on the email, and again, it's a bit too cold, also 2019, in glass 2. Glug, 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 glug. Now, because some of you might be just 1 or 2 people tasting these wines and you might think, oh, half a bottle each is enough. We don't need the extra half a bottle on a Thursday night. Probably many people will enjoy drinking the extra half a bottle anyway. Penny, hi. Sorry about that. But we can still get the pack to you, Penny, if you need it. I can't even remember if have you ordered it? Has it just not arrived yet? Anyway, hello, have a glass of something lovely anyway and join in the chat. No oysters, Linda, that's bad. So what I was going to suggest is if you don't want to drink the whole bottle of Chablis today and you want to keep some of it for maybe tomorrow, then what I suggest you do is as soon as you've opened it and put some in your glass, then you very carefully decant. I usually do this over a sink because it can get a bit slippy. Decant into the half bottle all the way up to the top. As close to the top as you can possibly get it because you don't want any headspace, and then put the screw cap straight on. Beautiful. Now that can go in the fridge and you can enjoy that tomorrow or sometime in the next few days. What I will suggest as well is for next week, you need this half bottle to be empty and rinsed out. So if you don't decant half the Chablis in there and you just drink all the wine tonight, give that a rinse with some hot water tonight and pop it upside down so it drains out overnight and dries out. And then once it's dried, just pop the lid on, pop it away in the cupboard till next week. If you have half a bottle of Chablis in there, then you're going to have to drink that before next Thursday. I'm sure that won't be too much of a chore. And then rinse it out and keep it for Thursday, because we're going to do the same thing with the red Burgundy next week. In fact, next week you have to decant half of the wine into a half bottle because we're going to taste that bottle of red Burgundy next week and the following week. So we're going to drag it over 2 weeks so that we can compare it to the Estate Pinot Noir next week and the Devil Ben Creek Pinot Noir the following week, which I think will be fascinating. Anyway, that's enough about future tastings. Let's get back to today's tasting. So the Moorooduc Estate label you're very familiar with. You're all looking at this lovely Chablis label as well. Chablis from Pierrick Laroche. There's a lot of Laroches in Chablis. Cousins of cousins and that kind of thing. So it's a good Chablis named La Roche. And this is a wine that's imported into Australia by the people who sell our wine in Victoria, Vintage and Vine. Hello, Ian and Tom, if you're watching. So I always think this is a really fascinating thing. And you guys have been asking if we can do a compare and contrast. Hello, Tennille. How are you going? The Chablis is delicious. And I think, Emily, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a lot of notice about the oysters because I didn't email you until yesterday, so I apologise. But these wines are very versatile with food. So whatever you're having afterwards, I haven't heard anything from Shell. Is Shell here? Oh, goodness, that could be a turn up for the books. Anyway, let's have a little taste. Oh, hello, Shell. French onion soup. Excellent. I'm glad to hear you didn't fail me. And Angela, did you manage to make your gougere? Angela was saying that she was going to make gougere today, which I was very impressed by. All right, let's have a taste. So I'm tasting the Moorooduc Estate Chardonnay first. Bit cold. Give it a bit of a swirl to let the air in and a smell. And it's quite tight because it's too cold and it's very young. So Richard's coming over to get the decanter. You might as well take the Chablis away with you as well. But as that warms up a little bit and opens up and the air gets into it, there's a beautiful lemon rind and there's a sort of a little lemon lime blossom kind of aromatic to that wine, which I think is gorgeous. A little bit of white peach, a little bit of honey, but it's quite fine, quite tight. Now, I don't know if I've probably told you guys this a million times already, but if you're having trouble smelling a wine that's a bit delicate, there's a couple of tricks to getting the most out of it. As I said, give it a really good swirl. Don't put too much wine in the glass. Give it a really good swirl to get air in. That'll help. That'll help to warm it up as well if it's warm outside. And then hands on the glass can warm it up even quicker. But if you smell it with your nose over the glass but not your mouth, and you keep your mouth open, it actually allows the air to circulate a little bit more. And it just seems to, Richard, your cat's behind you wanting to come in. The cat keeps coming to the door and running away again. So there we go. 2 cats in tonight. Okay, beautiful. It is a little bit crunchy, Anne. There is a world of difference between the 2 wines, Michael. I know I'm taking it much more slowly than you have, and I did actually have a little smell of I decanted a bottle of Chablis for Jeff and for Jeremy and this earlier today, and I had a little smell. It's rather lovely. So it's the McIntyre, it's the Moorooduc Estate Chardonnay first, Angela. So both of these wines are made from Chardonnay, just to keep everything very clear. Chablis is a region in France to the north of Burgundy. So it's part of Greater Burgundy. It's almost as far north as the southernmost part of Champagne. So it's quite a lot further north than the rest of Burgundy, and it's a really special place in the world for growing and making Chardonnay. So first thing I'm going to say is here at Moorooduc Estate, we're not trying to make wine that looks like any kind of French wine. We borrow some winemaking techniques from winemakers in Burgundy because the different ways you can make wine are not really that different wherever you are in the world. But we're working really hard to make wine here that smells and tastes of where it's grown. So it's Chardonnay that's grown here at Moorooduc. This wine has got fruit from the McIntyre vineyard and the Robinson vineyard. More McIntyre vineyard fruit, usually about 80% McIntyre vineyard fruit, about 20% Robinson in here. Hello, Samantha, Sam, Paul, Francesca, and too many kids. Hi. So just letting it open up a little bit more, and that honey and that white peach, white nectarine note is coming through. There's also a little flinty note. There's a little salty note there as well. It smells a little bit of ocean breezes. And there's a little strut match flinty character there, which I think is really attractive. It's very subtle. It's really in the background, and I don't like that character to be anything more than very much a background note, but I'm seeing a little bit of that just in the background here. On the palate, it's crisp. The acid's really firm. It's making my mouth water like crazy. It's a little bit like biting into a really ripe lemon in a pleasant way, not a difficult way. I'm one of those people who, when I get a really good ripe lemon, bit in my drink, I'll tend to eat the lemon at the end of the drink rather than leaving it there. And this reminds me a bit of that. It's got that saltiness. It's got that bright citrus fruit character, lemon, a little bit of lime, and a little bit of yellow grapefruit there just on the palate. Very citrusy, less peachy, less nectarine on the palate. Some really nice stony, flinty, salty characters on the finish as well. And it's because it's so young, it's quite light on the palate. It's got really good flavour concentration, but it's not a heavy wine. It's got a really beautiful kind of it sort of floats across the back of the palate, and you can still taste those lovely lemony flavours long after it's gone, which is really cool. All right, I'll come back to that and let it open up a little bit. And the second wine that I'm tasting is the Chablis, also Chardonnay. No worries, Peter and Karen. Honey's a really good thing to find in Chardonnay, and I find it in a lot of our Chardonnay, and it's really interesting. If you're going to get really geeky and specific, it's quite a lot like that. We've got a honey farm just down the road, and if you go and do a honey tasting and you taste their stringy gum honey, or they also do a wildflower honey. It's got that sort of Australian honey flavour to it, and I know that's going to sound really really wanky to some of you guys, but seriously, if you taste honey from different parts of the world, it's quite different because, again, the bees are getting pollen from plants that are very close to where they are, and so the aromas and flavours of the honey is going to be different, just as the aromas and flavours of these two wines, even though they're made of Chardonnay, because they're grown in such different places. The winemaking is actually probably not that different, but the Chablis probably hasn't seen any new oak, whereas the Moorooduc Estate Chardonnay's seen a little bit, maybe 15 to 20% new oak. The aromas are very different, Matt. And for me, the Chablis is much less lemon and more lime. Definitely a lot more flint in the Chablis, Cotty. And there's a different kind of honey aroma, and this is what I'm talking about. It's not like any Australian honey, but it tastes very much like honey that I've had in France. It's more delicate and it's a bit more floral. It's hard to describe, but it's honey, but European honey. Anyway, I'll shut up about that now. The Chablis also got a little bit of a green apple-y note to it. Chablis is a cooler climate than you'd see even here on the Mornington Peninsula, which is seen as being a pretty cool climate for Australia. But Chablis is cooler. It's the vines struggle a bit more to get the fruit really ripe, and so you retain more natural acidity. You get less fruit development. The fruit characters will be slightly less ripe. So in the case of the Chablis, then you are seeing sort of green pear, green apple, as well as some lime and lime blossom coming through. It is, Craig, quite a fruit-forward style for Chablis. Now, obviously, to keep the box for Drinks with Kate at that lovely price point of $250, I had to be pretty careful about what Chablis and what Burgundy we could afford to buy to put in here. But this is, I think, a really lovely modern style of Chablis. I was really happy with it when I tasted it. I said, absolutely, we'll do that for our Chablis, because it is quite fruit forward, but the fruit is quite different from an Australian Chardonnay. And it shows to me, Zach and Jack, I think that's really interesting. Angela's saying honey biscuits. Zach and Jack are saying that Chablis has a late harvest bouquet for us. And this wine probably did see a little bit of botrytis in the fruit. You get that sort of honey, orange marmalade-y kind of aromatic there. What I was going to say is that a lot of people in Australia talk about making Chablis-style Chardonnay, which what they mean they're doing is picking the fruit earlier to retain more acidity. But because they're picking it earlier, they've had less flavour development and less fruit development. Whereas in Chablis, you have to wait for longer. Because it's cooler, you have to wait for longer for the acid to sort of soften. And what that means is that the fruit actually develops flavour more slowly, but can develop much riper flavour characters in a cool, in a cool expression of that ripeness, compared to a Chardonnay that is grown with more sunshine and a little bit more warmth. So in Australia, trying to make Chablis-style Chardonnay by just picking it early to retain natural acidity is, to my mind, a complete travesty, because you're not making Chablis-style Chardonnay, you're making unripe Chardonnay that doesn't have as much flavour and just has more acid. It's an Australian style of Chardonnay, but it's a different style of Chardonnay, and because Chablis is so much more than just a high-acid white wine. It is a high-acid white wine because it's grown in a really cool climate, but it has a lot of flavour development in a subtle and elegant way. And so you get some of that honey biscuit, you get some of that sort of buttery character because they're definitely going to put this wine through a malolactic, let the wine go through a malolactic fermentation, because that will help to soften the acid a little bit, so you get a little bit more of that butteriness, but it's not fat and rich like a warm climate Australian Chardonnay that's ripe and overripe and over maloed and over oaked, all those kind of things. So it's all about responding appropriately to the climate that you're growing the grapes in and trying to make a wine that expresses where you are as this is what I believe in. I mean, you know, I can't tell anybody else what to do, but if you try and make the wine that is the best wine that your place in the world can create, then surely that's going to be better than trying to say, well, we're going to try and make a wine like those guys somewhere else in the world that are a bit more famous than us, but we don't have the same conditions, so we'll just manipulate it by picking it early. It doesn't work. Anyway, rant over. Michael is agreeing that the Chablis punches well beyond its weight. I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, this wine would retail for about $40 a bottle, I'd say, in a reasonably priced wine store. So it's about, and that's why I picked it as well, because it's the same sort of price retail as the Moorooduc Estate Chardonnay full bottle. It is like creamed honey, Cotty. It's a really kind of more subtle, buttery honey character on the nose here. I haven't even put it in my mouth yet, so I should probably do that. But just to respond, Michael, the attempt of a winery that sounds like a movie to mimic Chablis has created a shocker. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I think there are a lot of people who are trying to mimic Chablis, and they're just not. They're not wines that have found their own place in the world, I don't think. I think they're trying to be something else. And, you know, it's best for us to all try and be who we are. And you would do the Tasmanian style in Tasmania, not a Chablis style in Tasmania. It would have more acid, but the flavour profile is different because they have a lot more sunshine in Tasmania. It's a different thing. You can eat now. Actually, no, hang on, you can't eat. Let me just put some Chablis in my mouth. It tastes really different. Again, it's more minerally, it's more stony. It's got that sort of real flinty and lots of honey coming forward, and that really ripe pear and apple, green apple and green pear, but ripe and sort of really lovely intensity. I think that's gorgeous. Now you can eat. Now that you've tasted them both with pristine palates, you can start eating. So hopefully the food and wine matches will be good. Penny, if you have ordered, if you've ordered if you ordered the wine box, next week's tasting is going to be Pinot Noir. So no oysters for Pinot Noir. Oysters with Chardonnay like this, crisp, fresh, bright Chardonnays with lovely acid line and nice tight fruit character. Young Chardonnays, really great with oysters. Should be great with, now who was it? Was it Jack? Was it you, Jack, that sent me the beautiful quote about Epoisse? So we've had conversations about Epoisse in the past. Angela, are you sending me photos again? Oh, those gougères look beautiful. Well done. I got an email from one of you. Jeff, I can't tell you what price at the moment because I'm on Drinks with Kate. Blah, 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 blah. 65 is fine. Where was that? If anyone can tell me what the quote was. I think it was you, Jackie. And Linda sent it through to me this morning. Sorry, this is very bad television. I hope you're enjoying your oysters with the two wines, or your cheese, or your chicken sandwiches, and your gougère that Angela's made. Angela's made beautiful puffy gougère. They look delicious. There we go. So it was Jackie Little. That's right. I thought it was you. So Jackie Googled Epoisse, and I have to share this beautiful quote for you that she found for me and sent to me. When you Google Epoisse, there is a quote that says, "It is an illegal offence to carry it on your person, one of the most dangerous foodstuffs on earth." So anyone who hasn't experienced the joys and the slight terror of Epoisse, it is really stinky, wash-dry, runny cheese. It's an amazing match to white Burgundy. It's a terrific match to good, fine type Chardonnay. So, Emily, you're off to Napa next week. How exciting. These compare very differently. Oh, Kevin's going to, of course, that makes sense. So comparing these to a Californian Chardonnay is pretty interesting. The Californians still, in general, with the mainstream, have much more continued to embrace those big, ripe, buttery, rich, full-bodied, oaky Chardonnays that Australians so fell out of love with about 10 years ago. So most of the Californian Chardonnays that you'll see in supermarkets and a lot of the mainstream ones that you'll see in restaurants as well will be that kind of big sunshine in the glass, big, rich, ripe, heavy styles of Chardonnay. But there is a new wave of Californian Chardonnay coming through, which is planted further north, so more in Sonoma and Anderson Valley, the Napa Valley. It's being picked a little bit earlier, and some of them are tending to do that thing where they pick it too early and it's just all about acid and not very much flavour. But some of them are getting really beautiful balance in the wines as well. And there's some terrific Californian Chardonnays out there, both in the old style and in the new style. Flowers is a really good one. There's quite a few good ones, but Flowers is the one that kind of pops into mind when I went to California on a wine trip 3 years ago now. It's the most gorgeous. It's very high up. It's on a very steep slope, and they get really good cooling from both the air coming in from the bay. They're quite close to the coast, and they're in Sonoma, I think. And I just remember the vineyard being high and steep and cool, and the wines having again this lovely kind of acid line as well as good flavour development. And I think that's the important thing with Chardonnay, that you want it to taste like Chardonnay. Just having acid is not good enough. Not having enough structure and having too ripe is also not that awesome. It's finding the balance somewhere in between, having that beautiful natural acidity, having those lovely citrus, green fruit in the case of the Chablis, stone fruit in a riper style. If you're getting too much into sort of the yellow peach, yellow nectarine, ripe tropical fruit, if it's starting to smell and taste like ripe mangoes and pineapples and things, and I think probably to most people's mind, the fruit's a little bit overripe. There are still people who like those big pineapple-y styles of Chardonnay, but they're not seen as being really the best example of what Chardonnay can do for you. So Jeff, Craig is having cheese puffs. You obviously don't read the emails that I send to the Drinks with Kate people, Jeff. So gougere are very traditional cheese puffs. They're made from choux pastry, which is the same pastry that you make profiteroles with, but you mix in quite a lot of cheese, often Gruyere, and then you bake them and you get these lovely puffy, air-filled pastries that you kind of bite into, and they're cheesy and they're light and beautiful. Shell, ingredient hot tip, tamami paste, Aussie tomatoes with the caramelized funk of black garlic. Andrew added to the soup and far out. In a good way, Shell. I'm thinking that you're probably saying that's a really good thing. It sounds delicious. It sounds amazing. Sorry, Michael, I thought you'd written parsnip, but you actually wrote Paris with a P on the end of it. The style of Chardonnay that won the tasting of Paris, that was back in the 70s, the original one, and that was a very traditional style of Chardonnay that they'd made very, very traditional for California. So they used French winemaking techniques, but they used very Californian fruit, and it wowed people because it was so different from anything that they'd tasted before. In the same way that Australian Chardonnay from the 1980s and early 90s really amazed people in the UK because they'd never had Chardonnay that was so generous in its flavour profile and so delicious. You know, those wines were really a revelation, because if you think about it, this Chablis is about as cheap as I was prepared to go to show you something that has typicity but also is well made. And these days, these producers are using New World modern winemaking techniques to make fruitier, more forward, styles of wine in the traditional regions of Chablis and Burgundy than they did back in the 1970s. Most white Burgundy that sold for, less than £50 or more would have been pretty tight, pretty fine, pretty low flavour, high acid. Chardonnays can make very neutral wine quite easily if you don't have enough sunshine. So to compare that sort of very acid line, not a lot of flavour, sort of wine that was given its character by its winemaking, so malolactic fermentation to soften the acid a little bit, give it a little bit of creaminess, bit of texture, oak to give it a bit more flavour and to give it a bit more body as well. All those things, and time on lees as well, gives it that sort of toasty, bready flavour as well. So to compare that to something that has got so much flavour from ripening Chardonnay in either the Californian sunshine or the Australian sunshine was an amazing shock for the UK trade, and they fell in love with those wines. And Chardonnay, as it was first sort of reinvented in Australia, Australians fell in love with them too, and Americans in the same way fell in love with those big, rich Chardonnays. We fell out of love with them. Well, not everyone did, but a lot of Australians fell out of love with them after kind of too many of the wines tasting similar and just looking for a different flavour profile. And a lot of Australians still don't understand that Chablis and white Burgundy are actually made from Chardonnay because they see them as being so different. Oh, Emily, Craig and Jeff's Imaginary Store is a cheese shop, I think. I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it, Craig? A cheese shop with maybe a little bit of wine and some gougere on sale, freshly baked every morning. Who's going to bake your gougere for you, Craig? Okay, so that Chablis, it's such a different aroma profile, but it's so lovely, and you can see that they're related in some way, but they're also so different. Horton's white Burgundy was actually not Chardonnay, I believe. It certainly became not Chardonnay. It was actually, what was it, Dad? Semillon? Yeah, Horton's white Burgundy. Horton's Western Australia. I think it was either Semillon, or it was a blend of Semillon and Chardonnay, or I think Horton's white Burgundy. That's right. It was a blend. It had Verdelho in it, and it had all sorts of stuff. Yeah. No, not for you, Emily. Sorry. And Cotty, absolutely. Can you imagine Jeff and Craig running this cheese shop? It would be exactly like the Monty Python cheese shop, I think, in the best possible way. Jeff's just discovered that he does know gougere. He just didn't know they were called that. Well, welcome to our world. So yes, Alison, this is the other thing in Australia. We used to call, thank you, Kay, Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Verdelho, and Riesling Semillon and Muscadel. There you go, Horton's white Burgundy. So this is another thing that we did in Australia in the 60s and 70s, probably a little bit earlier, maybe going into the 80s for some wines, is instead of labelling wine by grape variety, because that wasn't done in Europe. And Australia's modern winemaking tradition came off the back of Australia making lots and lots of fortified wine. And in South Australia, yes, they kept making a bit of Shiraz and a bit of Riesling, but the winemakers drank it and the general public kind of mostly didn't. A cheesy souffle would be delightful, Pete. Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you, Michael. So because in the sort of modern Australian dry table winemaking re-emergence, there wasn't an understanding of what the grape varieties tasted like, but there was an understanding amongst wine drinkers in Australia of what Burgundy tasted like and what Hock, which was the name for German Riesling, tasted like. and what red Burgundy tasted like, and what Hermitage, which was the name for Shiraz. So that's why Grange was originally called Grange Hermitage, because they were saying this is a Hermitage from Grange, Penfolds, but we called a lot of white wine Chablis. If it was Hunter Valley Chablis, it was Semillon. If it was Clare Valley Chablis, it was probably Riesling. So we used a lot of names that didn't have anything to do with the grape variety, but were more trying to describe the style of the wine that people were making. And it was only really sometime in the 70s that I think Murray Tyrrell was one of the first people. He certainly was the first person to label a wine Chardonnay when he made his first single varietal Chardonnay in about, I think it was like 1978 or something like that. It was not that long ago. And then people started going, oh, well, this is what Chardonnay tastes like from Australia. So then that caught on, and we got more into the habit of Hermitage in yes, Jeff. So Jeff's asking, wasn't Hermitage just a straight Syrah? Is Grange straight Shiraz? No, they didn't care about, what I'm saying, Jeff, is they didn't care about the blend of the grape varieties. They cared about what they were trying to make their wine taste like that reminded them of a European wine. So it didn't matter that, because Grange Hermitage was made as an homage to Bordeaux originally. Oh God, what was his name? Come on, Dad. The winemaker, Max Schubert. There you go, Max Schubert. I pulled it out of my brain. Max Schubert went to Bordeaux in the 1950s, and he came back and he's like, I want to make wine the way that they make wine in Bordeaux. And he looked around. Well, he was making wine for Penfolds. He looked around. He's gone, I've got no Cabernet grapes to source to make this wine, so I'll use what's at hand. That'll be Shiraz, because that's what was growing in that area back then and still now. So he used predominantly Shiraz. He didn't have any French oak barrels, so he used American oak barrels because that's what he had. And he made this wine in secret and hid it at the back of the cellar for a number of years, and then showed it to his bosses. That, like, he made three vintages of it, showed it to his bosses. They went, this is the most terrible wine that anyone's ever made. Throw it out. Don't ever make it again. He went, oh, okay, and hid it again and kept making it, and then brought it out again and showed it to some people a few years later. And that was the beginning of Grange. And the fact that Grange now is made from Shiraz with some Cabernet in it, and it's blended from different regions all across South Australia, has got nothing to do with Hermitage in the Rhone, in the Northern Rhone, but originally anything that was, so Hunter Valley Shiraz was called Hunter Valley Hermitage, or sometimes Hunter Valley Burgundy if it was a bit of a lighter, fruitier style. It didn't have anything to do with the grape variety. It was about what it reminded them of in old world style wines. Alison and Kay are talking about Hortons and Hock. Correct, Michael. The 2017 Grange is 100% Shiraz and usually isn't. But, you know. Yes, his bosses said it was a best of fine port, needed to be fortified, and then they could possibly sell it. So Horton's white Burgundy was a game changer for a lot of Australians. So you guys are not on your own there. The other wines that were game changers for Australian wine drinkers in the 70s were things like Cold Duck, which was a sparkling red wine. I'm not quite sure what. It probably had Shiraz and some other stuff in it. Black Tower Riesling, which was from South Australia, slightly sweet Mosel-style Australian Riesling. And it took us a little while to get a bit more sophisticated and to develop our own wine labelling technique and all that kind of thing. So, Angela, Chablis is not a grape variety. It is a region. So Chablis is a region in France. It's also part of greater Burgundy. So some people will talk about Chablis and the rest of Burgundy separately, and Chablis only makes Chardonnay. Someone will probably say, oh, I've had a Pinot Noir from Chablis. And yes, there are a few, but they're not very many, and they're usually not worth tasting. They're pretty hard work. But if you think of Chablis as Chardonnay and you think of it as being as far north as you can get, Blue Nun as well, Cotty, absolutely. And also that Portuguese Matus Rosé was another one that people really got into as imported wine. But Australian styles, Queen Adelaide Riesling, Linda, was one of the first Australian Rieslings that kind of took off. So Angela, it's made from just Chardonnay. Chablis is the region. It also defines the style. And as Craig pointed out, if you go back to the Moorooduc now that it's opened up and warmed up, you can smell that toasty, cedary oak underlying the fruit. The fruit's a little bit richer and riper. It's still got that lovely finesse and line to it, but it has opened up a lot in the oaks. The spicy sort of cedary, sandalwoody oak characters are coming through, whereas the Chablis probably hasn't seen any new oak, as I said, so won't smell like oak. It just smells of really lovely, cool climate fruit. It's almost, to me, it almost smells like the smell of the snow, and I know that's a pretty silly thing to say, but it just does remind me of cold things, cold mountain stream, that smell of really, really cold water flowing over rocks, that very clear stream water that you can drink when you're hiking in the high hills. Oh, here we go. Everyone's going into old wines. Blue Nun, Queen Adelaide Riesling, Max Schubert. Peter and Karen. Your grandfather told Max Schubert that he had better wines in Europe when he tried an early Grange. Opportunity lost, absolutely. Well, it wasn't a European style wine. It was a very essentially Australian interpretation of European French winemaking translated into something very Australian. So it was very different. So people are going back into their bad drinking experiences. Benin Moselle, absolutely, Linda. You all right, Jill? Some of the Chablis gone down the wrong way for Jill. I think she'll be okay. Craig, are you punning on the names of white wines from Bordeaux or red wines from Bordeaux? Grave exceptionnel. Anyway. Or are you talking about that gravelly, stony character in the Chablis? As they open up, they're sort of going in very different directions. The Moorooduc Chardonnay is looking lovely. And I think absolutely Shell is having that with the Gruyere, and I think that wine's probably going to be better with Gruyere than maybe the Chablis would be with Gruyere, but give it a go. You guys are hilarious. Brown Brothers Fruity Lexia, absolutely, Michael. And in fact, it's interesting you should say that, because I don't know if any of you have read Max Allen's most recent book, which I can't quite remember. It's what's it called? It's something about being drunk. Anyway, it's a great book. If you Google Max Allen's newest book, his first story is about drinking Brown Brothers Fruity Lexia that has been aged in the cellar for 40 years and how the wine has aged magnificently, and takes him back to a childhood memory of stealing Fruity Lexia at a family picnic when he was young, and getting that sort of taste of honeyed sweetness. So it depends. It depends where you start and when you start. But a lot of people start on sweet wine and then evolve to dry wine. But I think. Oh, Sam, birthday next week. I'm hoping that everyone's eaten all their oysters by now. Did you have those of you who had oysters, did you have a preference for which wine worked best with the oysters? Because Chablis and oysters is a really classic match. And next time you go to Paris, which we all will do one day in the not too distant future, I hope. Oh, another birthday next week, Alison. We'll have to sing you all happy birthday. I'm not singing online. But next time you go to Paris, go to one of those. Are you all right, Jill? People want to know if you're okay. She's okay. She's back and she's managed not to die, which is awesome. The Chablis. She was so excited she gasped as she was tasting the Chablis and tried to breathe it in rather than swallowing it. It's a nasty thing. It happens to me sometimes. I'm so glad, Rob and Deb. Thank you. I reckon probably the Chablis might have worked slightly better than the Moorooduc Estate Chardonnay with the oysters, but I don't know. Intoxicating, that's right. Thank you, Renee. Nigel, thank you, Nigel. Intoxicating or intoxicated? Anyway, it's a fabulous book. It's absolutely worth reading. He's a very good storyteller and lots of really good stories about the history of the Australian wine industry and also sort of ideas about merging sort of Indigenous culture with our culture and all that stuff, which is really awesome. Oh, yes, there's people who are, Sharpie and Rod say that you've got to stay well for Sunday, Jill, because they're looking forward to coming to eat the food. She's all right. She's laughing. But what I was going to say about Paris is that if you go to Paris and you go to one of those wonderful restaurants that has all the fresh seafood out the front, I can give next time you go to, if you don't have one sort of on your list, I can give you a couple of suggestions. Order Chablis on the wine. Chablis will be absolutely on the wine list. Order a bottle of fresh Chablis. Eat some freshly shucked oysters in a Parisian restaurant, and it will bring joy to your heart and a song in your head and all of that stuff. Really, really cool. And before we get to go to France, you can do that sort of thing at places like Francois in Melbourne. I don't know how far ahead they're booked now, but every restaurant that I've spoken to is madly dealing with overbooking and waiting lists and things like that. But Francois, to my mind, does the best freshly shucked oysters to go with a glass of champagne or a glass of Chablis in Melbourne. There's lots of great restaurants in Melbourne, but Francois does a great freshly shucked plate of oysters. Very, very superb. Okay, so Sam and Angela are having birthday headbuttings. I'm coming of age next year, so that's very exciting, whatever that means. And Deb asked me the other day when the Drinks with Kate trip to Europe might be, and I don't think it'll be next year, but, you know, if you keep bugging me about it, then we might be able to do it. Maybe in 2023, who knows? Who knows? If people are interested enough and we can put together an interesting, yes, Anne, 21 times 2 plus a little bit more. It's a significant birthday. I'll just leave it at that. I think that's right, Michael. We do need lots of joy at the moment. And for me, Chardonnay is all about joy when it's made beautifully like this, opening up really, really well. I reckon I might leave it at that because we're nearly at the 50-minute mark and we could probably keep talking for hours. But you guys have probably got Drinks with Kate Does Europe absolutely to nil. Just give me a little bit of time to remember how to travel before I commit to traveling with a whole lot of other people that I'm responsible for. Next week, remember, you'll need to keep your half bottle once it's empty if you've done the whole decanty trick. That's nice. You'll need your empty half bottle next week because we're going to be decanting the red Burgundy into here. We'll be drinking half of the bottle of red Burgundy next week with a full bottle of Moorooduc Estate Pinot Noir, and the following week we'll be having the other half a bottle of red Burgundy with Devil Bean Creek Pinot Noir. And if you can't bear to do that, that's okay. Drink what you like whenever you like and just listen along and join in the chat. it's all good. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to go and check out Tumami Paste Shell. That sounds amazing. Thank you, everyone. Take care. I'll see you again next week. And cheers to all the joys of Chardonnay. See you later, guys. Thank you.